Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Next to Madison. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with a very successful CEO and founder of a company that focuses on diversity in the workplace and also through suppliers, and how it is so important that companies have diversity, which actually can help increase their profit. So I don't know too much about all this area. This isn't my area of expertise, but I am so excited to learn with you guys today listening. So with that being said, I'm going to bring on my guest, Diane Ashley, who is the CEO and founder of DTA Diversity Counts. And she has a very impressive resume. So let's hear what she's got to say. Welcome. How are you?
So, hi, Madison. Thank you. And so glad to have your invitation and to spend a little bit of time with you.
Yes, I'm very excited that you're here. So tell us about your company and kind of what led to the creation of it.
So, my company actually, Frank, culmination of probably 20 plus years of work in not necessarily strictly diversity, equity, and inclusion, but a host of life experiences. And I'm going to digress for a second and just say to you that, you never know, and I'll say this for our younger listeners who are just thinking about their careers, what do you want to do? And what are you going to do? So I started languages in second grade, right? Started French in second grade. Third grade, I told everyone who would listen that, you know what, I want to be a diplomat and work in the U.S. Foreign Service, which people thought I was kind of a strange little third grader to say that. But that actually informed all of my decisions. And I went on and took 3 more languages, and I applied to Yale University because Yale, and I got into Yale, Brown, and Trinity College in Hartford. But Yale had the best French department in the country at the time. So off I packed my stuff and go on to school. And I said, being that I'm first generation college in my family, so for those of you who also fall in this part, realize that you have a responsibility.
Yes.
And so I'm saying, okay, cool. I'm going to go do the junior year abroad, and I'm going to go live in France, and I'm going to work on my French so I can get ready to do this U.S. Foreign Service job. Okay. First of all, disclaimer, how can you be 19 and not have a good time living in France? So yes. I went to the Sorbonne. Yes, I learned French. I ate too many, croissants and had a great time. It was a lot of fun. But I came to a very sobering realization at the end of the year. And that was, mind you, I had this goal, this singular goal since third grade. And I realized at the end, in June, when it was time to come back home, I don't want to live outside of the U.S. I don't really want to live abroad for 30 years, which is if you're in the U.S. Foreign Service, that's what happens to you. If you want to be an ambassador, right? If you want to be a diplomat. So, I come back from college, totally crestfallen, totally depressed. Grades went down. I had lost my way. Every egg in my basket had broken.
Yeah.
And so my point of it is to say to you that, never give up on your goal. Never give up on your heart's desire, because I came back, I kind of backed into business. That wasn't the original intent, as you know. And it took me a number of years to kind of get myself back on track. But, and so I went through consulting. I went back to get my master's in human resources. I went to law school, and I kind of came back into this area. I grew up in New Jersey, came back into this area, started working in roles as a chief diversity officer. And, we'll talk about this more in a second, Madison, but 2007, 2008, I'm sitting in the New York Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and I'm kind of having one of those reflective moments like, what does this all mean? And I said, oh my gosh, what does a chief diversity officer do? You said you don't know as much about it. So a CDO, chief diversity officer, is responsible for ensuring that people who may come from different backgrounds learn how to work together, learn about collaboration, understand and appreciate and respect each other, helping people who come from maybe underrepresented backgrounds, be you a woman, be you LGBT, be you from a foreign country, whatever it is that makes you a quote unquote diverse individual, that you have the same opportunity as everybody walking in the door. right? And
Yes.
so it came to me as in a ton of bricks, almost realization that, hey, guess what? You are a chief diversity officer, but you know what? You could swap out that D and you could really become a chief diplomatic officer.
Oh,
So my point is that, again, I got my wish, but I want to say to everybody, never give up on your wish. You may get your wish, you may have to be flexible. It may not look like you originally thought it would be, but at the same time, you know what? It still is attainable. So I would encourage anyone who is listening today who may be at that crossroads to think about that.
excellent. Very well said. So tell us about your company.
So my company, DTA Diversity Counts, is basically an advisory firm. What I wanted to do is allow organizations that are in the space, in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, either led by a chief diversity officer or contemplating getting into this whole area, or a CEO who may be thinking about what should I do next. These are the organizations that I work with right now. They're the clients that I work with right now. I have helped in terms of facilitating workshops, assessments for organizations. I've also been involved in podcasts such as this, panels such as this, working with a whole array of institutions from university settings to corporate settings, stand-up presentations for companies, anything that has to do with advancing the whole realm of diversity, equity, inclusion is something that I'm really very excited about. The other thing too that my company's kind of bifurcated. So the other area that I'm also interested in is working toward continuing my experience and becoming a member of a corporate board of directors. Why that? Because I have sat on 6 not-for-profit boards of directors and trustees,
Excellent.
and I have really learned over the course of that experience how important good corporate governance is. And for those of us on the call who may not be as familiar with the difference between governance and management, when you're on a board of directors, what your role is, you're responsible for helping the management of a company give them guidance, but not doing their job. So you're a little bit one-off, but you really are helping them to hold their feet to the fire around accountability. If you're a board member, you can ask all those hard questions that sometimes you can't ask as an employee, because the CEO is the person who reports to you, the board members. And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, there to really make impact in a very unique kind of a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you feel that having a program like yours in a company impacts the profits and the success of a business? If different way of saying it is having diversity and focusing on
Yeah, I think, well, we are living in interesting times. I'll say
that.
that certainly.
Yeah,
Anyone
that's an understatement.
anyone who has survived 2020 knows that we are living in interesting times, right?
Yeah.
And in some respects, the world has changed, and the world will never go back to what it has been.
Yeah.
So I would say certainly we are, and with the incoming administration, there's going to be much more of an emphasis on ensuring that we have more people around the table, right? That
Yeah.
people, that belonging is important, that you can be your authentic self in the workplace or in your community group or wherever in your school. Those are going to be different types of competencies that people are going to be looking for. And interestingly enough, in 2014, McKinsey, the world famous consulting firm, actually came out with a study that actually proves the business case for diversity, because it said primarily that companies that have an array of people who have different views sitting around sitting around the table to resolve a complex problem, will always beat a group of individuals, no matter what they look like. If they all think the same, this group that is more diverse in their thinking will come up with more innovation. They will come up with more ways to approach it, more perspectives in the room, and that equates to bottom line increased profitability.
Yeah.
The
No.
other thing I think that is important to think about too is, when you pause and think about companies that no longer exist, and you start thinking about like what happened to such and such a company, Kodak, for example, right?
Yeah.
Xerox. These are companies that they were legends in the business world, and now they barely exist. GE even. These were companies, and you say, what happened to them? You start really studying what kind of started to happen is they got stripped away because they couldn't remain innovative. They kept doing the same thing. The senior management perhaps didn't listen to even their employees. And so that's why I say I'm a huge proponent that companies have got to do a better job of paying attention here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's an article that I just read, and it was talking about what are some of the things you can do to predict for 2021. And I think the advice that they provided was simply this. I really think that the extent to which we can predict the future is around how can we predict, how can we learn how to adapt in terms of addressing challenges.
Right. No, absolutely. So did you hear me? We kind of froze, or it kind of broke up a little bit when I was talking about the diversity, where you've got different types of people and different types of backgrounds in there.
Right.
Which is,
no, it froze.
yeah, right. Which is important to profitability. But I think what we've seen in the past 4 years is this division between the two political parties, right? And it's been, I don't even have words for it. It's just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But that could be part of diversity too, is making sure that you have people from different political spectrums, because you don't want all the same opinion. So that would go into diversity too now, right?
You're exactly right. And that's just what I was saying earlier, that, when we say diversity basically equates to difference, right? So difference can be an array of things. I mean, think whatever it is that makes things different. It can be weight, it can be religion, it can be how you look, how you think politically, absolutely. And what we want, and I'm very hopeful that we can go back to more of a centrist perspective where, there's nothing wrong with people having different views. It's part of what's made America, frankly, a very strong country.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't have one way of thinking. Countries that have had one way of thinking, like Russia, are countries that actually, frankly, have fallen behind in terms of innovation.
100%.
So part of what's made our country so successful, excuse me, is that we brought people here, either as immigrants or people that have grown up here, and we meld them. We make them appreciate each other. So to your point, you're absolutely right. I am really hoping we get back to more of a perspective where, I may not agree with you, but I have an opportunity and a responsibility to respect your view, and you have to do the same for me.
Amen. It just so well said, and we hope that kind of happens. But what is your opinion kind of on the economy going forward? We've got the Fed printing a bunch of money, we've got rates low, we've got this really high stock market, stocks are doing really well again today, we've got the crypto kicking butt. What's your opinion? Because it's like it's all almost an illusion of how high things are. What's your opinion on when things are going to blow up temporarily?
Okay, so I would be remiss, Madison, if I didn't say my Fed training would say simply that these are my opinions and my opinions alone. But simply, I would say certainly that I think we are going to be in a bit of a challenge. And the thing that gives me pause and comfort is that I'm so delighted that our incoming president has selected Janet Yellen to be our Treasury Secretary. So, you've got an individual who's extraordinarily well respected around the world. I worked with her when she served as the Federal Reserve Chair for a number of years. She worked primarily under the Obama administration. And I just know that, Janet's going to approach this job with probably a much more holistic viewpoint, which, by the way, for those of you, again, anyone here is contemplating being an economist, I was saying we can't have enough economists, and particularly women economists, because Janet's a labor economist by training. And, you need someone who's going to be able to look around the entire landscape and say, okay, so to your point earlier, what are the various perspectives that are necessary to consider in the whole program. It's not enough simply to say quantitatively we need to be X to Y, such and such a curve. You need to also really incorporate in that conversation, how is this affecting people? How is this affecting the labor market? So, it's a roundabout way to answer your question, but I think you're absolutely right in terms of the debt for our country, and it's going to take quite a bit of time to dig it back out. But I do feel that, a lot of the solution lies in leadership. And I think that, I think Chair Yellen is going to be the right leader for this particular time.
So I was just having a conversation with somebody this morning about, you're sitting on some cash. Now's not a good time to go in. I mean, the markets are doing well. They keep going up. They keep going up. But when is this going to blow up in our face? And it's not to scare people or sound like a pessimist. For me, it's about educating people so they can be prepared and make the right move so that they're okay, or they can take advantage of a downturn, because there's a lot of opportunity when things go down, and just as much as there is when things go up. So yeah,
Right.
I've had a couple episodes where I'm like, this is going to blow up. This is not going to happen. This isn't sustainable. And it's like, it's not negative thinking. It's you reduce the fear when you're prepared.
Right. And so I would say certainly part of what I'm encouraged about is, to your point, you want an administration that's going to be much more transparent. You want an administration that's going to be prepared, capable, and competent.
Okay.
Right. And so I would say certainly with somebody with her particular credential, I think you're going to get that in terms of your Treasury Secretary. Mind you, she's the only woman that's ever been head of the Economic Council, Treasury Secretary, and head of the Federal Reserve.
Isn't that amazing?
So it is amazing, right? It's amazing. So she's going to bring a very holistic viewpoint into the whole conversation.
Okay.
And I think that you're absolutely correct that, there's money to be made on both sides of the table. There was a whole story about what happened in the housing market in 2008.
Yes.
Where I forgot the name of the individual, but there was a gentleman who shorted the mortgage market and made like $1 billion, right? When you're shorting, you're betting against it. And of course, as you know, it all blew up, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
So he makes a ton of money, but a ton of people lose their homes and their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you want someone who's going to be educating individuals for what they should think about making decisions around in their financials going forward. I think the other piece is going to be interesting as well is, what is actually at the end of the day going to be the result of the stimulus conversation? Are people in fact going to get to $2,000? Is it going to stay at $600? We are in such a strange moment in our country's history right now,
Yeah.
where we're not exactly certain as where it's going to go. Although I will say, I saw an article today in the New York Times, and I didn't get an opportunity to read the whole article, but it was basically saying, you think things are crazy right now, you should have been around for the 1876 presidential inauguration. So the premise of the article was basically showing a scene that we're seeing on MSNBC and CNN today, where you've got hundreds of people hanging around on top of the Capitol steps. It's the same photograph almost, and it's just as much craziness. So yeah, I think the point of it is, there's lessons to be learned. Just like we just saw a program that was aired a couple of days ago, outlining the effect of the pandemic, the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, and how, it took a number of years for people to get out of it, because part of it, and they featured Dr. Fauci in the course of the conversation. He talked about part of why it took so long for them to get over it was because they had no cure at that point.
Yes.
But the issues were exactly the same as what we see today. They showed a number of newspaper articles where people were saying, "Oh, I have personal freedom. I don't want to wear a mask." Sound familiar? So you had a lot of stuff like that going on, and you had people kind of just going into the hospital and just basically, if you're going to be brought in the hospital, you're going to die, because there was no medical intervention at that point that had been invented to help people at that point. And so I think was it 1 million people died? There were a lot.
It was,
So
something astronomical. I think it was more than that. Might have been like 2 million.
Yeah, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it was horrible. It was more than I think all of the deaths in, I think, World War One. So
what's important is to know your history. So history, as they say, doesn't repeat itself, but history is really starting to repeat itself in a way with, and hopefully this is the last pandemic in our lifetime. But what was interesting is my father's a CPA, and I was having this conversation because
okay,
you mentioned the stimulus, and there's a lot of people that are out of work, not their fault, and they're getting unemployment, and then they've
right,
been adding these additional benefits, which has been such a godsend to these people. And then you have the businesses that are out of work, or the businesses that are small, and they're getting their PPP.
right.
As long as they follow those rules, that loan is tax-free and forgiven. Great. Perfect. However,
Right.
nobody's talking about the fact that come April 15th, all the people that were struggling and on unemployment and received this stimulus check are then going to have to pay taxes. And my guess is the number that withheld or put away the tax liability wasn't much. So nobody's talking about, if they're making it tax-free for the businesses, why aren't we talking about making it tax-free for the unemployed?
I think you're raising a good point, and I think it's the whole CARES Act you're talking about, and I think that it's a serious issue, and that's why I'm saying to you, I think you need to have some educated people that actually do not necessarily have an axe to grind or a preference for big business, because those bills were actually designed for people the people you're describing, right? People who lost their jobs, people at the risk of losing their homes or their apartments, that kind of thing. So, I think it hopefully will get another look, and if possible, maybe there can be an intervention between now and April.
I'm just shocked because it's not even mentioned. Like, it's not even being like, nobody's talking about it. It's not even like being voted.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Nobody's talked about the fact that come April, there's a huge tax thing happening. And that's going to be interesting to see. And I said that to my dad, and he said, well, call your congressman and see what they say, and
He's right. Your dad is right. Call your congressmen and your senators. Absolutely. I think the thing, though, that is, and maybe it's just me, but the thing that I'm really hoping will happen again in this new administration coming forward in January, they're not going to be able to solve every problem. We realize that, and certainly not overnight.
no.
But I do think that based upon the individuals that, and their track records over these years, I'll say it like that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there will be as acute a preference given to the benefit of large businesses over small businesses and the individual. So, I'm really hoping that you're right. People will be working the Treasury to address that. Economic Council will start to look at those kinds of issues. And this is exactly going right to back to the very beginning of our conversation. This is why you need people who are coming to the table with different perspectives. There was a there was a joke that was going around in 2008. When a lot of the banks tanked,
Yeah.
Lehman Brothers died, Merrill Lynch got sold. And what some other organizations? There were quite a number of banks. And I remember being at the bank at the Fed at that particular point. But there was a kind of an insider joke that said, what if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Sisters? Would it have been the same outcome? And I always kind of laugh when I think about that, because you would have had maybe the perspective of women and how women think about problems. If that input had been there, would they have gone in the direction that they had gone? I can't say categorically yes or no, but I do think that, to your point earlier, I do think women sometimes look at problems in a different way than men do.
Our brains just work differently.
Correct. I mean, we could get into a neuroscience conversation around that, because, from that perspective, the brain, a woman's brain is actually more suited for complex problem solving. I don't know if that's a nature installation because a mom or a caretaker has got to be able to do 5 things at the same time and function.
Yeah.
But women actually can handle more complex things simultaneously than men can, and that's been proven.
Right. No, absolutely. That is, I've never even heard of that, but because I used to work in finance and I was actually in the mortgage-backed security world.
Oh, okay.
2 short years, and so I was there when all this happened. We used to buy those loans and put them into bonds. So it was, that whole thing was so relevant to me because I planned to get out anyways to take a different career path. But and people ask me all the time, did you see this starting to go down the pipeline? And it's like when you're so young and you're an analyst, you see things that are weird, but when somebody way up tells you, no, it's normal, this is what people are doing, you kind of believe them in a way. But there was only 5 women on that trading floor of 150. So maybe things,
Oh,
maybe
and people
things,
on a trading floor, oh my gosh, there are legendary stories about the trading floor, right?
yes, as a comedian, it served me very well. I fit right in. I was like, bring it. I'm not
There's
offended by it.
material.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So another thing that's interesting, we're talking about the different genders and how that could have made a difference and how it is so important that we've realized to have, different opinions in there and both sexes in there. There's been a recent conversation of getting rid of the terms male and female, mother, father. And this is where I took a pause and said, what? Wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
We're losing, or are we stripping our identities and just becoming? So how do you feel about that in a diversity program?
So, it's creating quite a bit of confusion. You're absolutely right. I think the goal, the altruistic goal with the whole gender neutral conversation is to recognize that you can now select as male, female, or other, right? And as people, particularly transgender people, come into the workplace, the challenge, and there are many stories about this. The challenge is, how are you going to be accepted or not, right? So I agree with you. My hope is that, people, it's part of your additional identity. So, the male, female, other, I understand it. I see the point of it. But I do think that male, female, I don't think that will hopefully not go away, because if you continue to use simply they, and that is the optionality of that third box, right?
Yeah.
You can certainly just choose to do that. But I think, for people that want to identify as a woman or want to identify as a man, I don't think that should stop.
No.
Again, the richness of our life experience is that you've got different people sitting around the table.
Right. It would be a very boring place if everybody thought exactly like you, right? So you always want to have those different. But yeah, it was interesting when I was hearing that. It was just like, it's kind of, people, it's just, I think the main thing is like, you just respect people for what they want to identify as.
Sure.
And I recently heard from somebody that their child is going into high school, and there was a term, a lot of the kids at the high school used a term called flurries or furries, which I am a comedian, so sorry, I'm going to get a little dirty, but furries used to be people that would dress in costumes, like animal costumes, and have
Mm-hmm.
that's what a furry was. So when he said there's a bunch of furries at this high school, I was like, what the heck? I was totally taken back. But he said furries is actually a term that they're also using for students who do not identify, who identify as something else other than a male or a female or transgender or gay and lesbian. They actually identify as something, they can identify as like a unicorn or a door, like they can identify as anything. And I'm thinking to myself, this is where I was like, hold on a second, like it's almost gone too far
And
where you can
listen,
identify as anything. And I was
and,
like, oh.
and Madison, you know what? This is always what ends up happening with change, right? It
Mhm.
always goes too far. It always, the thing always tips all the way to the extreme to kind of hopefully come back towards center. it's like everything that's happened in history with movements of people, et cetera, et cetera. So
So
I'm just thinking about how clothing changes, right? How customs change and how customs change into culture. And the example I was sharing was basically, once upon a time, women who got their ears pierced was a big deal, right? You didn't do that. And then I think the 60s, I think, is when women started getting like two ears pierced, two piercings in their ear. And you were looked at kind of bohemian if you did that. And the same for tattoos. I mean, remember tattoos, that was definitely something that nice women didn't have. Sailors wore tattoos. And now when you think about it today, it's kind of incorporated into the culture. Like it's not a big deal. It's so, and I think part of it's generationally driven as well.
uh-huh.
But that's my point is that, things have to kind of migrate all the way to the extreme, and then hopefully they'll drift back as things are slowly being accepted. I think the key here is that adults, frankly, are extraordinarily resistant to change. All
Yes.
the neuroscience talks about that, right? And so because of that, it makes life very difficult because you can't, quote unquote, you can't tell adults anything. Adults have to kind of, ideally, adults, for them to want to change, they have to discover it for themselves. So
Yeah.
I'll give you an example again, back in my world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The companies that have done probably the most leadership work around this issue, companies, educational institutions, you name it, society stuff, are led often by a person. It can be a woman or a man, but they're led by someone who has had ideally some kind of a firsthand experience where they either were different or they had a daughter or a son who was different, but that's firsthand experience where the person can see up close and personal what it's like. The example that I will share is there is a former CEO, Bob Moritz, who was head of North America for PwC, Price Waterhouse. And he always would go out and tell a story about how early in his career, Price Waterhouse sent him to go live in Japan for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said for him, that was an epiphany because he had never been in a culture where he was the minority, where English was not the first language. And, when he came back, he has been an outstanding advocate for diversity because he gets it. He gets what it's like to be other.
Yeah, and I think that's why as humans we should experience as much as we can, so we understand other people's cultures and beliefs and differences, and you know, basically just get out of your own bubble, so to say.
Get out of your bubble is, what, and that's so interesting. You use that word, but it's so important. Madison, if I had my druthers, I would kind of do something like what the Israeli government does. Every young person in Israel between 18 and 20 is to serve in the military, right? And I don't necessarily mean, say it again?
I think we should 100% do that in this country.
Well, what it does is it creates a baseline so that everybody, when you're 20, you've all had this common experience. I don't know necessarily if you need to live to be in military per se, but what I was going to say is I would really wish everybody in this country between those ages, because it's a formative age then, right? Mm-hmm. That you, like I did going into Europe. When I came back from France, I got to tell you, it changed my entire world perspective. I wish all young people in this country go live somewhere else. I don't care if you live in Europe. I don't care if you live in Africa. I don't care if you live in Asia. Go live somewhere else and then come back here. Your world perspective will be absolutely different. I had to understand what it was like to go to school in a foreign country, negotiate stuff in French. Yeah, you think you know French when you go there. No, you don't. Not the real French.
Yeah.
Not the curse words, So, you understand like, and how their systems are different and what's legal, what's fair, what's equitable. All these things are different when you go to different countries, and you come back and you have a totally different appreciation for this country. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why, although France is a very, it's a sophisticated Western country, blah, 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 did not have the quality of life we have here. And that's frankly what happened with me and why I said, oh, I don't really want to live abroad.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's what drove me to come back home. So it's the kind of thing, you're exactly right when you say that. I think experientially, I wish everybody would, in some respect, be forced to get out of their bubble, because I think then we'd have a whole lot better understanding of each other.
Absolutely. The reason I like the military thing too, I think, living overseas would be great, but the military thing is, I just from my friends and family that have served, there's just such a first of all, they've got a pride for the country and an appreciation, and they've seen things that most people haven't seen. And what we're seeing with these younger generations is this sense of entitlement, that I'm
Hmm.
entitled to that, that I don't have to work hard for that, that I should
Right.
just be given that because I exist. And it's not true. Their work ethic is through the roof. I mean, they've experienced life and death, and I just think that it would be such a how different it would be. And I think that we might even have more success here because
Well,
people
I mean,
have
let's talk about it. You're correct. Let's talk about historically, right? The
that.
military, frankly, was way ahead of corporate America in terms of incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
You have many more minority generals, senior people who rose in the military much faster than their comparable individuals would have in corporate America. Now, granted, the military had its problems too. I mean, when you think about World War II, it was still segregated. But I think that after that, I think because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it's Eisenhower, but I think it was Truman, um, that led the whole notion of desegregating the military. And to your point, the military does teach you a certain leadership model which can be replicated across all the branches of service. You're right.
Hmm.
There's a consistency there.
Yeah, and I just the working hard and just an appreciation. Like there's just a different, you get rid of that entitlement. Now you have an appreciation for the things you have, the bed you sleep in, your family, because that's kind of, taken away. But that's a whole other discussion that I don't know if it'll ever happen.
I
But
hope so.
I do too. Maybe I'll run for president one day and I'll say, listen,
Okay.
we're gonna shape you youngins right up. Good thing
You
nobody
know,
can vote for me under 18, but they'll be like, what, military? No.
yeah, because women think differently.
Yeah, because it's true. I mean, kids really don't start thinking like you do until you're in your 30s. When you're younger, things are that are important to you are not so important to you.
Hmm.
But before we wrap up, I just want to talk about, because we do have, so many changes in the House and the Senate and the new administration. What are your kind of thoughts on that, and how do you see it going, and what do you like about the administration and what do you dislike about the administration?
So I think it's going to be the great experiment on some level.
Okay.
I wish you could wake up on January 21st and all the problems will be solved. That's not going to happen right away, right? So it's going to take a lot of time. I think, unfortunately, and I know you might have listeners who, support the current administration, but I really do think, my personal opinion is having observed it in real time, is that I think there was way too much focus on one group of individuals at the expense of others. I'll say it like that.
Okay.
So I think that will change, and I am very excited about that.
Okay.
Um, I'm excited about that. I'm encouraged about that. I think that we have some new blood in the House and the Senate, and I think, part of what both those branches need to do is, at some point, I was talking with some friends and we were saying, should they really incorporate term limits? Right? Should people still be serving in that capacity at 80 plus years old?
No. No. I,
So I think that hopefully maybe that will be something that we'll start to kind of deal with,
oh, good.
because you do need to really create succession plans.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a ceiling, then you don't create one.
Right.
So I think that the other thing I think that is something that is going to be a challenge is we have had these 4 years, I think, have created so much divisiveness. I think that, to your point earlier, you were talking about how people can be on two sides of the politics. How many of us have worked for many years and you have friends that are on both sides of the aisle, you still go to see each other's families, you still hang out. You, this last 4 years has created scenarios where I know people that don't even speak to their own relatives anymore. That
It's
is not how it's supposed to, that's not normal. That's not how it's supposed to be. I know someone who is so upset with her relative being in a zealot in the other party that they don't even they don't even communicate with each other anymore. That has to stop.
it
That,
has to. I mean,
that
I've always
has to
been
stop.
like I've always been I was when I was growing up, I felt I was a Republican and I was in the Young Republicans Club. And then as I got older, I said, okay, well, maybe I support more liberal things. So maybe I'm a Democrat. And then I realized that I like certain things about both parties. And I said, well, then I'm a moderate. And I've always gone that way. And that way it's like I can flip between the channels and
Right.
try to educate myself and kind of glass half full, so to say, because I just couldn't get in bed with one or the other. But it's amazing how I kind of switched. And majority of my family is they're split. I mean, it's Republicans and Democrats, and the Democrats
Mm-hmm.
are very, very gung-ho on their beliefs, and not so much the Republicans. I think they don't talk about it as much, but there hasn't been a divide. And I think that goes with maybe, I don't know, maturity or what the relationship was like before. If there was a crack in the foundation before, that could probably rupture it. But I hope that we get to that point where somebody can say, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, and it doesn't matter. That we're just in that camp of diversity. We need all of you, to come
We
in.
do. We need everybody. We need the viewpoints. There is something that we can learn.
Absolutely.
Even if what you learn is what not to do, because I mean, we haven't had this conversation, but we all, at some point, if you haven't yet in your career, you will have at some point some boss that you say, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I have ever seen. And the lessons may be to learn, okay, here's what not to do as a boss. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, right. You learn from your mistakes, but you can also learn from other people's mistakes. What is one or two or multiple things that you liked about the previous administration, the Trump administration?
I think one of the things that the Trump administration was able to accomplish is certainly, I think, they were effective in terms of continuing to build the economy. Certainly, stock market started. Obama, I think, was a lot unsung hero in terms of turning around the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And Trump continued that in that direction. I think that was a good thing. I think the other thing, and here's something I frankly don't understand, but he's missed an opportunity, is he created the Operation Warp Speed program for the vaccine. And, unfortunately, he really, to me, feels like he didn't really give it enough focus, because that could have been like his parting glory in terms of like getting people to like, okay, it's out, start getting it. How can we make it available to people? Blah, blah, blah. And it kind of missed the opportunity, because I think that, that could have, his own aides were saying to him, look, this is something that you can kind of tout as an accomplishment. And he was so focused, I think, on losing the election that he really missed the opportunity on that one. So,
To get it out faster than it is right
well,
now.
not only to get it out faster, but certainly even to like kind of be the voice, be the leader on like, I really worried about the coronavirus, and I really ensured that we got the vaccine and stuff done. It kind of became like a secondary issue than the primary issue.
Yeah, I know it'll be very interesting looking back, how people can see things differently or what's going to change. But change is good, right? So we can have
Change is change. Change is change. Guess what, folks?
everything changes.
It's always going to be change. And for the part that I always laugh about when I think about 2020, Madison, is that the pace of change is what increased. I've said to many people, what happened last year under normal circumstances, like moving, for example, to the remote workplace, that kind of thing, telework, whatever you want to call it, that was going to naturally happen probably in about 5 to 7 years. Because people were starting to work from home. That wasn't like a new thing. I think the part that really got everybody is we all got thrown off the rails at the same time.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of preparation for it.
Exactly. So, I think that the pace of change is, I think, what's going to be really something we have to pay attention to. And if you want to continue to stay relevant, and a person wants to continue to be able to not only survive but thrive in the upcoming, not only the economy but in our society, the extent to which we learn how to pivot, the extent to which we learn how to become resilient, and the extent to which we learn how to quickly adapt, those are going to be skill sets everybody's going to have to be familiar with.
Yeah.
So it's just the way the world had moved.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, learn how to adapt. That's all you can do. Because there's so many things in this world that we have zero control over. Half the country is happy about the new administration. Half the country is upset about the administration. Just remember, if you're losing sleep at night and it's over something you can't control, let it go. Let it
Let
go.
it go and plan, adapt for the future. Don't plan, but understand that, like my career choice,
Yep.
you may get it, but it may not look exactly like you started out hoping it would look. So be aware of that.
That's why
it's funny. Let's close real quickly with this. I just read an article by a woman named Gwen Moran, and she was talking about, the question was, how do we go forward for 2021? And she comes up with these kinds of very helpful tips. Leave behind predicting the future, adapt planning, leave behind letting your phone rule your day, adapt setting yourself up for success, right? Leave behind overscheduling yourself. How many of us know that we've sat in a Zoom world in front of the computer all day long and you're totally burnt out? Adopt editing your workday ruthlessly. Leave behind blending everything. And I very much believe in this. Adapt, setting more boundaries. In other words, they want to set you up for 8 Zooms in a row. No, you knock yourself out, put yourself out. I'm not available then because I'm going to go out and get some fresh air.
Right.
Leave behind isolating yourself excessively. And I see a lot of people now that are seriously depressed because they haven't done anything since March but stay in the house. Find new ways to connect. So, I think leave behind, and finally leave behind clinging to what's not working, to what we've been talking about today. Adopt, making time for creating new or better habits.
I love that. Who wrote that article again?
A woman by the name of Gwen Moran, Moran.
Well, that was a perfect way to end.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think, it's kind of like what I have believed in my spirit for years, because, and as I just said, now we have to do this more quickly. You can't kind of cogitate on stuff for a couple of years. No, guess what?
Time is
COVID.
Right, exactly. So, Diane, where can people find you if they want to reach out or learn more about your company and what you're doing?
Absolutely. You know what? I am on my LinkedIn site, so feel free to get me. It's Diane T. Ashley, or you can get me at DTA I don't have a website, so don't look that up. You'll waste your time. I'm certainly also too on Google. And so, yeah, I'd love to get your feedback. And I think that it's going to be an exciting time this year, Madison. Maybe we can do a check-in in 6 months to see, okay, so where are we in this world right now? So is it still around? Did it burn down? Like, what happened? So,
well, hopefully there's no COVID and we're out at the bar socializing again.
I can't wait. I'm telling you, I love being out, and I'm a real extrovert, and this has really been tough for me. Because I do like the person-to-person interaction. I think there's so much more that you can gain when you have an opportunity to spend some time with someone.
100%. So yeah, keep the faith, everybody. And Diane, thank you so much for being my guest. And you guys listening wherever you may be, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next to Madison. And we'll see you guys next time to find out who's next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms, and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.